my name is Janelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you to First Man, one of the most stunning emotional and technical achievements I've seen this year. At this time, please join me in welcoming tonight's guests. I want to start with an Academy Award winner for his screenplay for Spotlight. Today, he received a BAFTA nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay for First Man. Please welcome Josh Singer. We have a two-time Oscar winner who just won his third Golden Globe on Sunday night for his score for First Man, Justin Hurwitz. We have a Golden Globe, SAG Award, and Emmy-winning actress known for her work on The Crown. She also received a BAFTA nomination this morning for her work in First Man. Please welcome Claire Foy. Quite simply one of the best actors of his or any generation. He is a two-time Academy Award nominee and a Golden Globe winner for a little movie called La La Land. Please welcome Ryan Gosling. I literally do not have time to list all the accolades that the film's director has received in his career. They, of course, include Best Director's honors from the DGA, a BAFTA award, 2 Golden Globes, and, of course, an Academy Award for Best Director. Please welcome Damien Chazelle. Thank you guys so much for being here. Again, congratulations on such a beautiful movie. I guess I just want to start at the beginning because you collaborated with a few of these people here on this great little indie called La La Land. I hope some people heard of it. But from what I understand, you were actually working on First Man even before then.
Yeah, I mean, Justin and I had been trying to get La La Land made for a while, and it was sort of during some of those years of that not happening that these producers, Whit Godfrey, Marty Bowen, and Isaac Klausner gave me the book that this movie's based on. And so I was kind of sort of in between things, I guess, when I got that book, and didn't really think I'd be interested in it. I just started reading, started learning a little more about who Neil actually was and how sort of borderline insane what he did and what the country did at that time was. And that kind of got me, revved up in a way that I wasn't expecting. So I pretty shortly thereafter was talking to both Josh and Ryan about the movie, and in Ryan's case, yeah, before we had started talking about Gene Kelly and whatnot. That quickly segued.
Natural, that conversation about Neil Armstrong would lead to Gene Kelly.
It always does.
And for the actors, I'm pretty sure Ryan and Claire, you guys weren't even born when Neil Armstrong did his infamous walk on the moon. Did you know much about the history before you read the script, and what appealed to you about Neil and Janet? I know I always want to reach for a mic.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I don't know how to do a Q&A without holding a
mic. you do good space work if you want to just...
Well, I knew very little. Well, nothing, really. I knew that he had walked on the moon. I'm sure I learned that, when I learned what the moon was. But, I knew nothing about the moon or him. Mm-hmm. And so, just that first read of Jim's book was just really overwhelming. It's such an incredible book, but a tall order, and Damien's sort of decision to focus on this one period of his life was really, I thought, inspired, and
In a way, it's kind of nice if you don't know something about someone who's so iconic or such a hero to so many people, because you're not as intimidated. Although I imagine it was still a little intimidating.
Yeah, it was a little intimidating.
And Claire, for you?
Yeah, like Ryan, I knew kind of the basics, I suppose. I think it's quite difficult to look back on that time without, when you know that it was a success, I suppose.
Yeah.
So you sort of see it all through the reference of going, well, of course we did that, and that must have been easy, and that sort of is the history that you accept when you're born after that time. But that was fascinating. I mean, it was fascinating for me just as a person, because obviously it wasn't necessary for me to kind of know any of the technical things, but there is no way in my everyday life that I ever would have read a book which involved knowing anything about any space things. So that was amazing to find out all that, but then also to find that Janet was this extraordinary kind of woman in the story as well.
Did that kind of surprise you? Because a lot of times, I think when I heard, a movie was being made about, space travel, first man on the moon, I had no idea that there'd be such a central female figure who was so fierce and, so pivotal to the story.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? I think those women exist, and therefore they existed in these men's lives as well. It's just that nobody thought they were interesting enough before. Even in any space film that came before, the wives that were depicted weren't necessarily like that. They just served the story, and I think that's a testament to Josh and to Damien, that they realised that there was something more interesting that Janet had to offer in life that needed to kind of be shown. Really, there was no point in kind of making her a woman that she wasn't.
Damien and Josh, can you sort of talk about you want to tell the story of space travel, but also grounding it in this human story and really this unimaginable tragedy that the Armstrongs went through?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, it's interesting. First of all, I just, because I didn't really get a chance to comment this morning, because I didn't wake up until, or I was with Boyd until like 10. So I missed all the calls, and I was like, oh, wow, that's fun. But a screenplay, it's a funny thing, right? I think a screenplay, a really good one, is a work of a lot of people. And so, it's funny because with the BAFTA nominations, there was only one name on the nomination, and that's a crime, because the nomination really should have gone to, as well, Damien and Ryan and Claire, because they all were, Damien read 100 drafts and gave me notes on 100 drafts, right? And that collaboration was, to me, the joy and the pain and the joy of this process, right?
Mostly joy, right?
100%, right? And thank you, sir, may I have another? Like, I would gladly, and then Ryan and Claire, when they came on board also, like, their notes, I can point to scenes, the Edgelock scene, that's because of Ryan. That's because Ryan said, like, why aren't we, talking about the fact that he loved musical theater? That's terrific. And I'd written a bad version of that scene. I was like, oh, wow, that should go there. And like, I wrote that scene in 10 minutes, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the piece. And it wouldn't have existed if Ryan hadn't, suggested and pushed. And there are a dozen things like that. I was then on the phone today talking about, one of the scenes that the fight scene, and how we went back and forth with Claire on parts of that, and with Ryan, and like, that scene, when I first saw the dailies of that scene, because it was one of the few days I wasn't able to be on set, and when I first saw the dailies of the scene, I watched it with the sound off. And I was like, because I'd heard there'd been some editing, I was like, let me watch it with the sound off, and I was like, yep, it's all there, right? Because it's not, at that point, it's not about the individual words, it's about what's happening in the scene, and the emotions in that scene were extraordinary because of the extraordinary actors and what they brought to it. I would say, like, Damien and I, always from the beginning, we were so struck by how this really was a story of grief, right? Which is, something that films, I think Damien was incredibly brave to try to tackle, right? Because it's not a light, happy, romp. This is a serious adult movie. It's because I think we were both so surprised that we had never heard anything about this daughter. Right, when George Bush passed away recently, all that week you didn't hear about him running the CIA or him being president. You heard about his 3-year-old daughter who had passed, and how he thought about her and prayed about her every day, right? And similarly, I was struck, like, that must have been so, I have a 2.5-year-old now. I can't imagine, right? All my fears are about what happens to that kid. And so that, and the amount of loss that the family's dealt with, and it's amazing. We met with Bonnie Bear, Olivia Houghton, who plays, Pat White reached out and sat with Bonnie, who was Pat's daughter, and she showed us pictures. When Ed's up in Gemini 4, Janet's the one over the house holding Pat's hand.
Really?
Right? They were that close, right? And so for Janet to have watched that happen to her next door neighbor, right? And they all said, like, after Ed died, Pat wasn't there, right? And just imagining, when you think about that scene of her trying to get, Neil to talk to the kids, like, of course she's, jumping out of her skin. Because she not only has watched it happen to her next door neighbor, but she lived through it where he almost died in a much easier mission, And so I think for Damien and I, the film was about grief and sacrifice, and being able to dive into the personal in a really powerful way, and again, some of the best stuff in this film is stuff we wrote scenes for, but then was ad-libbed, right? And was stuff that was improvised. And that, I think, speaks to the strength of our actors, right? And how good they were and how much they really inhabited these characters. But then B, the brilliance of Damien's directing. So, which I think is unparalleled.
And Justin, as someone who's known Damien, you guys were college roommates, is that correct? Yeah. I don't know why I find that so amusing. I'm trying to imagine you guys. Who was the messy one?
I'd like to say that. Who was the messy one?
Oh, who's the messy one?
Yes.
I think I was. Justin's always been very clean and like
So,
orderly. I was probably the one leaving stuff on the floor.
how does this collaboration even work? I mean, do you start talking before you see a script? Do you talk about themes? Do you talk about emotions? I'm just so curious because, as I think I've told you before, I don't understand music at all. I just know what I find beautiful.
Yeah, it usually starts with the script. He shows me whatever draft he's ready to show. He shows that to me, and so I read 2 drafts of the script. I read one back in 2015 over the holidays. It was one of your earlier drafts, and then the next one, we were in the halfway through editing La La Land, so I just read it. It was over the holidays. We were taking a break from La La Land, so I read it just to sort of get it in my mind, and then we didn't talk about it again because we had to finish La La Land. We didn't talk about it again until March of 2017. So that spring, that was when he started prepping. That was when it was finally time to really get going on the movie. So I read the newest draft, which was, I guess, a pre-production draft, and that's when we really got going on it. So I read it, sort of caught up with where they were with the story at that point, and then it really starts. I start at the piano. I sit down at the piano and start composing, but the first thing I need before that happens is just to talk to Damien and hear what he wants to feel from the music. We like, very thematic scores. The first thing we always look for is a theme melody. Not that every movie we'll ever make will need to have a melodic score, but so far we've liked melodic scores. So in terms of looking for that melody, what do we want to feel from that melody? And so the words Damien threw at me were grief, pain. Actually, I remember the term he used. I was looking back recently in our emails to see exactly what he said, and I love this term. He said a type of cosmic pain, which I thought was really interesting, because I took that to be about Neil searching the universe for answers, and because it wasn't just about. The theme we didn't want to just be sad. It had to have some other colors in it, and I thought it was it was also about moving on and living and finding a way to live with this pain. So it had to have certain bittersweet qualities to it as well. But grief, pain, a sort of cosmic pain, and loneliness, that was the other word we talked about. And then, so that's where I started sitting at the piano. There were a few more themes after that. There was a family theme, there was sort of a work theme, but the main theme, that's sort of what he wanted to feel, and that's what I was looking for. And we talked about how to use that theme throughout the movie, and how to apply it. We like to sort of, once we have our main theme, secondary theme, we like to talk about how to apply it in different places of the movie. So we talked about how it wouldn't just be the loss of the daughter at the very beginning. It would be used for some of the biggest sequences in the movie. It would be used for Apollo 11 and that whole mission, and how it would need to be big and brassy and exciting, but even those cues would need to have some sort of underpinning with that sense of loss, because that's what that grief and that loss is, something that has been with Neil and Janet and their family the whole time. It's motivated them, or at least they threw themselves into this adventure because of it. And so we talked a lot about how do we make the launch, how do we make the landing, how do we make those steps on the moon, all of it exciting and full of tension, and in the case of the moon, serene. How do we bring all those things that we need for those beats of the story, but how do we have it all be in the context of these losses, these very tragic losses along the way.
By the way, I just heard today, I don't know if this is true, so it's really wonderful that I would bring it up if it's not. But someone told me that the score wasn't like locked until 72 hours before your Venice premiere. Is that true? Or you didn't get it into the...
That was the end of the mix. The end of the mix was
Okay.
like 4 days, I think, before.
Oh, yes, yeah, I know, yeah, because we were, I mean, in a way, yeah, it wasn't so much the score on its own was kind of dangling or something, it was that the whole movie was dangling. I've never had a tighter turnaround I remember we locked the mix and locked the color, and the next day I was on the plane to Venice. So.
There were some big score things that changed. In fact, I had an orchestra pickup day, like I think 5 days before the end of the mix, so that's like 9 days before Venice. I was recording an orchestra.
Everything was kind of chaotic towards the end.
And then we were still, yeah, there was one cue that we were still figuring out. We were rebuilding it essentially. We try not to do that. We really try not to do that. But there was one cue that we sort of rebuilt on the last day of the mix.
Yeah. But we try to avoid those things. Clearly, it's not always successful. But,
I wanted to ask the actors actually, when you're playing real people, especially people who are so iconic and have family members who are still alive, do you feel an additional responsibility versus creating a character from scratch? And were you able to meet with and talk to people who knew Neil and Janet?
Yes.
Yes. I'm just going to hold the silence until you give us a longer answer. Well, I know his
Very
sons
Neil
were
of
very
him.
involved, weren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Neil and Janet's sons, Mark and Rick, were extremely helpful, and we got we're able to meet Janet before she passed away, which was incredible for the boys to take us, for her to allow us into her home and to meet her. We met with June Armstrong, Neil's sister. We met at the farm where Neil was born. It was really just, I've never had more help on a film. Everybody, it was an all hands on deck situation, so much goodwill, but yeah, it's also, knowing that they're all going to see the film as well, so there was a pressure there for sure, but it was good. It fueled the film, and there should have been that kind of pressure. And in the case of something like this, where so many people, lost so much in this process, that we should be held accountable for what we were doing and saying. And so I felt like just sorry, what were you saying?
Well, Claire, I believe that you've played real people before. You've actually won a lot of awards for it. But I also don't think you've ever met the Queen. Well, I know you did, but like before the crown.
Yeah.
I remember. What was it like to actually sit with Janet? And was there one specific thing you wanted to ask her, or just sort of get a sense of her?
I didn't meet her.
You didn't meet her?
No. I'd sort of presumed that at some point during this whole journey, I would, but she died earlier this year, so I never met her. But like Ryan said, her children were incredibly generous. I can't really imagine what it's like to be them. I can't put myself in a position having grown up with that story, that family story, and then having people come along and say, we'd like to make a film about it, how I would react. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't react how they have, which is just to be involved and to be kind and to share their life with us. But it's a really funny thing when you're playing someone who's real, and you know that people who are very close to it are going to watch it. I played another real person, and the lady in question, when she went to watch the film, the only thing she could say afterwards was, "Oh, I never would have worn a hat like that." And I have spoken to quite a lot. I've had emails from Jan's friends who said, the film was wonderful, but just so you know, when we did have the pool parties, the barbecue wouldn't have been on that. Like,
Really?
that's when you know you've hopefully sort of got it a little bit right.
That's the worst thing they can say.
But that's the stuff of
barbecue.
Yeah.
Josh.
God damn it. But you know, that's what you remember of your. You know, that's the big feelings aren't what you want to kind of get right in your life in that way. It's kind of going, I would never have worn those socks or.
I'll jump in here just to say that I think Claire and Ryan are both being incredibly humble because, I mean, Claire, there were tapes of Janet. We have tapes that Damien and I made and Ryan and Damien made when they sat with Janet.
Jim's tapes as
And
well.
then Jim and Claire listened to those over and over, which is why the accent is perfect, right? Again, they both did so much research that there were all sorts of suggestions that they brought to the table before and during filming that it was shocking to me. There's a speech that Ryan gives, when Neil's being interviewed, which was a speech that, was part of an interview that Rick had sent, or Mark had sent to Ryan, and Ryan had said, hey, this is great, and we plugged it into the interview scene, and it's one of my favorite pieces about, why go to space. And similarly, there's a thing that Claire says in the scene where she's back and forth with Deke, and most of that scene is scripted, but there's something that she brought to it, which is, I'm going to tell everybody on the lawn, which I didn't tell her was what Janet had said that she had told Jim. I mean, and that's literally from the interview with Janet and Jim that she said, this is what I told Deke later, right? So that's how good and on it they were, right? And they really did use that. All the many people who were around trying to make this right, they reached out to them, which I think, I think if they hadn't, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere near as close.
And am I wrong, or are Rick and Mark Armstrong in the movie?
They are in little, they're both in Mission Control. Mark has the bigger role, which makes sense because apparently he was always the louder child. He plays Paul Haney, who's the sort of public relations liaison. But basically what that means is he plays the guy who winds up turning off the squawk box on his own mom, which apparently when he told his mom that he was doing that in the movie, she thought that was the funniest thing she'd ever done. Apparently she laughed up a storm, just the idea. He steals the squawk box from her and then he turns it off. What a brat.
I've watched so many of the videos about the making of the movie because the technical achievements are mind-blowing, and I know it is acting. But also, Ryan, a lot of times you were in these little boxes and they're shaking you around. I can't imagine it was were you having fun, or could it be miserable at times, or both?
It was really fun.
Really good.
I highly recommend it. You can get into one of them. No, it was fun, yes, but it was also it was so much incredible work had been done to recreate that experience for us as actors. I mean, it's such a testament to Damien that, he would do that, because I think, I can't, you can't imagine what he went through every day. Some days just not even getting a shot, just so that everything could, align in camera. and happen, you know, as real as possible for us.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it was real. It was just a privilege to, you know, sit in the seat and be the person experiencing all this incredible work.
You don't even have like a sliver of claustrophobia? Because I got claustrophobic watching, actually when this movie opens, I was like, oh God, oh God, oh God, like gripping the poor person next to me.
Ryan's really, I mean, not to speak for you, but he's, many of the actors actually did have, as I would completely had, you know, sort of borderline panic attacks and things that, but Ryan somehow, thankfully, because it would have been hard to make the movie, seemed to actually not only be okay with it, but sometimes enjoy the solitude of it, of just being able to kind of tap into in a way, the quiet that Neil himself experienced. You put that bubble helmet on and you kind of get the air starts hissing and you're in your capsule. And I guess in a way what Ryan's talking about is something that you're always trying to do in a movie set, that whether you're an actor or a director or whoever, is try to ironically forget you're making a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe, you know, sometimes those things that can be physically arduous can actually help.
Yeah.
You can't imagine how helpful it is just not to have to do your own shaking. Can you imagine doing your own shaking?
I've definitely done a couple of bumps.
Yeah, just do your own shaking, you know, you're just like, and you're trying, you know, he just spared us from that. So I wasn't gonna complain about being shaken. You also couldn't complain on this film because if you went to the monitor, there was someone who'd actually been to the moon and you'd say, "Oh, I see it's uncomfortable." But you know, Ryan, when I went to the moon, it just sort of like puts it all in perspective.
Josh, you wanted to add something?
Only, so I'm wearing a watch, which is one of the Omegas that was made for us, that was used, I think, in the Gemini sequence, right? And so we got these watches in Venice, and I've been wearing it for a couple weeks, and I noticed it wasn't telling good time, which is odd, right? Because it's an Omega Speedmaster, and it was made by Omega. So I found a watch guy in Santa Monica, and I took it in. And he opened it up and he's like, I don't understand because the watch looks brand new, but what did you do to this watch? What has it been through? Because it looks like it's been through a car crash. I was like, oh, that was all the shaking in the Gemini that we put these guys through. It had destroyed the insides of the watch. So that's how rough it was on these
Broke
guys.
Omega.
Yeah.
But somehow Ryan made it through.
Argument could be made against that.
Before we go, I just want to say I know that the response to this movie has been so warm, and you have so many fans, including Lawrence O'Donnell, who I think is here tonight. Where'd he go? Oh, he's right over here. Apparently, you worked with Josh on The West Wing.
Someone, oh God.
But it's first of all, it's very intimidating to have you here and me asking questions. But when somebody who is like knows that much about facts and says you got it right, that's got to be like the biggest compliment.
Yeah, it's a huge compliment, and it's also in a way, because it speaks to what Ryan, Claire, Josh have all talked about was the sort of big anxiety going through us during the whole movie, which we had to feel because you're dealing with, as you say, both iconic events, but also events that actually aren't that old. These are people who, unfortunately not in Neil and Janet's case, but in a lot of the other cases, are with us today, and we knew they'd be seeing the film. So I think we were constantly aware of the people who knew a ton about the era and the program, the people who actually lived through the era and the program, and just all sorts of people watching us, trying to make sure that we were being more ruthless than they would be.
Yeah. Justin, it sounds like you had it easy.
Justin got to just make stuff up. So.
Justin learned how to play the theremin,
Wait, you didn't know how before this?
No.
You learned to play it for this movie?
Learned, yeah. I'm not a professional theremin player, but
But you play every cue in the movie.
I think technically you are now.
Yeah, you got
I
paid.
mean, that officially makes you a professional.
Right.
nobody's ever paid me to play it. So.
His neighbors paid him to stop.
Well, again, I want to congratulate you guys on such a beautiful movie. I want to thank you guys for being a great audience. If you can just stay seated, there could be someone like that. Thank you so much.